Big news out of El Salvador today. The president is announcing plans for Bitcoin City. Pretty exciting, very unique, very different. Let's talk about it. Fill us in. What's happening?
It's really exciting. It's very interesting. It's very new. It's very fresh. If you've been following Bitcoin for a long time, as you have, it's not really a surprise, right? Because we've always talked about it, and certainly we're not the only ones to talk about Bitcoin as being a completely neutral, completely decentralized digital asset that's perfectly scarce, which is something that's very new for the world. And now that we have this, what kind of innovation and what kind of ideas can come out of having that kind of an asset? And certainly, Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador, who's clearly a Bitcoiner, clearly went down the rabbit hole pretty deep and understands it, is taking a big risk here, taking a big bet. So what he's doing is he's building this Bitcoin city. And Bitcoin City is going to be funded by selling bonds. And he's selling $1 billion in these bonds. And we're going to put a graphic up. I'm going to go through the attributes of this bond so we can all see it. And then I'm going to provide some kind of analysis on where I think this could go. So $1 billion bond that pays off 6.5% per year. That's a coupon. For anyone that's familiar with bonds, it's, the way to think about how a bond works is no different than taking a mortgage on your house to buy the house and then paying back and paying interest on that mortgage over time to eventually build equity in your home. And countries do this. It's no different. The United States has treasury bills, which are the bonds that investors can buy. They pay 1.5%, which is very low. And the reason why it's low is because the investment world sees that as the highest credit rating. The United States government has the highest credrit rating, so it's not going to pay off as much because it's guaranteed. It's backed by the full faith and trust of the federal government. So you usually see countries that are issuing debt. No one has 1.5% because the United States is the leader of the world. But countries that have more perceived credit risk will pay off higher yields on their bonds. So 6.5% is there's investment banks and financial institutions around the world that are required to hold a certain amount of fixed income products like bonds on their balance sheets as a hedge for risk. Basel II mandates it. And there's other regulations around the world that mandate that these banks, take these kinds of investments. And that's why you see that there's a market for bonds. So what he's really trying to do here is attract institutional capital that are willing to take a higher risk, but also get a higher yield at 6.5%. Money that goes into this, $1 billion that goes into this bond, he's going to use $500 million to buy Bitcoin, for a lockup of 5 years. And he's betting, with this bond, he's betting that after 5 years, that is going to be worth, that portion of the Bitcoin is going to be worth a lot of money. Blockstream, the company that provides the stewardship over the code of Bitcoin, is estimating that in 5 years, one Bitcoin is going to be worth $1 million, which is, could happen. There's potential there. But also, even if it doesn't, even if it falls short, it's still going to be pretty profitable in 5 years. So they're making a bet that that in 5 years, that Bitcoin is going to be worth a lot more. And then they start selling that Bitcoin to pay back the debt obligation that they have to their bondholders. So that's $500 million that's going to be used to buy Bitcoin. And the other $500 million is going to be used to build the infrastructure around Bitcoin City. And the idea is he's going to build this Bitcoin City to attract Bitcoiners, presumably, where they're not going to be paying any taxes except for a value-added tax. For those that live in European countries or even travel to European countries, you've seen on your hotel bill a VAT tax. It's a value-added tax, and that's the way he sees, he's going to create these economic incentives to attract individuals and, potentially businesses into Bitcoin City to grow and develop that tax base.
And I'm reading that he's going to be mining out of the volcanoes. So they're using the energy, the heat from the volcanoes to create electricity to run miners' computers that are then going to be extracting value right there, carbon-free.
Genius.
Value.
Renewable energy, sustainable energy coming from the volcano. Once he develops that mining infrastructure and puts it in place, all he's relying on after that is the steam. And so the cost of that steam is really just to run the operation. It's free energy. So he really understands Bitcoin. He really understands how to lower the cost of mining Bitcoin. And from what I could tell, I mean, just some really good, sound, innovative.
It's interesting to see it because you constantly hear people making arguments that Bitcoin is bad for the environment without giving you examples of exactly what they're saying. And then you also hear the other side saying, yeah, but there's this big push, it incentivizes renewables. But then a lot of people say, well, where's the evidence? Boom, right there. I mean, that is a flagship example of how it's happening.
Yeah, and for every miner that is mining Bitcoin very cheaply, what they're doing is putting out of business those miners that are using those expensive, dirty forms of energy. So it's a process, and we see it taking place here for sure.
Very cool, very cool. So what is the timeline? Any insights on how is this going to get rolled out?
They didn't say, but he's a very aggressive president. When he announced the Chivo wallet, I was actually in Miami when they made the announcement at the Bitcoin conference, and it was only rolled out about the following week. It was passed by Parliament, and 2 weeks after that, they started rolling it out.
Wow.
So I anticipate that we're going to see this on a pretty fast timeline. And I want to talk a little bit about putting ourselves in the mind of someone like Nayib Bukele, who what choices does he have to raise capital? Typically these Latin American countries, well, let's talk about their history for a minute. Their history has always been, really one of insecurity around their own currency. The currency is backed by the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar monetary policy affects them tremendously, even more than it does Americans. Really, any currency that's backed by the dollar. And for him to go out and raise capital at this point, he only has really three options: the World Bank, the IMF, or China. And all three of those come with strings attached. So he's going for a fourth option here. He's going for an alternative in Bitcoin that, neutral, completely decentralized, and has a lot of certainty around it as far as the long-term performance can be. So I think that's, that's really the interesting piece here, is because he's taken a major, major risk. So he must have run the calculations and figured that for long-term success for his country, for the citizens of El Salvador, that this is the route that he wants to take.
Very cool. Well, we'll
fantastic.
be watching. Very exciting stuff. The innovation kind of never ends in this world. So
yeah,
I'm sure bigger things happening very soon too.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for joining us, guys. Go to our website, sascodigital.com, to learn more. Please like and subscribe this video, and we will see you next time.